Have you ever wondered why your money seems to vanish into thin air, leaving you wondering where it all went? Picture this. It's a Tuesday evening, and you're sitting on the edge of your couch, staring down at the banking app on your phone. The screen glows in the dim room, and as your eyes focus on the balance at the top, you feel a sudden dropping sensation in your stomach. You blink hard, hoping the app hasn't refreshed properly. You pull down on the screen, watching the little loading circle spin, but the number stays exactly the same. It's significantly lower than you thought it would be. Your mind immediately starts racing to find the culprit. You start scrolling through the recent transactions, fully expecting to find a massive fraudulent charge. Maybe someone stole your debit card number. Or maybe there's a massive annual insurance bill you completely forgot was scheduled to hit your checking account this week. You desperately want a big villain. You want an obvious mistake that easily explains where hundreds of dollars went. Instead, as your thumb swipes down the glass screen, what you find is incredibly anticlimactic. There's no major theft. There's no huge forgotten bill. You just find a chaotic, endless list of tiny numbers. A $4 iced coffee, an $11 fast food lunch, a $7 recurring software subscription you forgot to cancel, $9 for a digital movie rental on a Friday night. None of these purchases felt like a big deal in the moment. When you tapped your card against the reader for that morning coffee, it felt completely harmless. It was just a few dollars. When you bought the lunch because you were running late, it felt like a necessary survival cost. You justified every single one of these tiny transactions as they were happening, firmly believing they were too small to derail your financial progress. But looking at them now, stacked up one after another in a long, relentless column on your screen, the harsh reality hits you. They form a thick fog that has completely obscured your financial landscape. Individually, they're entirely invisible. Together, they're a massive, silent leak in the hull of your financial boat. You start doing the mental math in your head, quickly realizing these forgettable moments have swallowed up a massive chunk of your paycheck. The initial panic in your stomach slowly twists into a deep, heavy sense of guilt and frustration. You feel foolish. How could you let this happen yet again? You consider yourself a smart and capable person. You work incredibly hard for your income. You probably even have a solid idea of what your big fixed expenses are. Yet despite successfully managing the big numbers, the small ones have completely sabotaged your stability. You let out a long, heavy sigh and toss your phone onto the couch cushion next to you. It feels exactly like you're constantly bailing water out of a sinking ship using a tiny plastic teaspoon. You promise yourself right then and there that starting tomorrow morning, you're going to track every single penny. You're going to be hyper-vigilant, you're going to stop wasting money on little everyday conveniences, but deep down, you already know exactly how this story ends. You've made this exact same enthusiastic promise to yourself a dozen times before. You might last 3 or 4 days with this restrictive mindset, but eventually you'll get tired or stressed at work, and you'll swipe your card for a small, frictionless convenience. The cycle will start all over again, and by next month, you'll be right back on this couch, staring at the exact same screen. If that scenario sounds completely familiar, you're absolutely not alone. Millions of incredibly smart, hardworking people face this exact same sinking feeling every single month. You sit there holding your phone, wondering how a series of completely insignificant choices somehow hijacked your entire financial life. You probably feel a deep sense of shame, telling yourself that you just lack basic discipline. But I need you to understand something right now. This isn't a personal moral failing. You aren't stupid, and you aren't fundamentally broken when it comes to money. Managing money in the modern world is utterly exhausting. You're constantly making complex decisions from the moment you wake up to the moment your head hits the pillow. You decide what to eat, how to handle that stressful email from your boss, how to navigate traffic, and how to keep your household running smoothly. By the time you're standing in line at the coffee shop or browsing a digital storefront late at night, your brain is completely drained. It's aggressively craving a tiny hit of comfort. And those tiny purchases are specifically designed to provide that immediate relief without triggering your internal alarm bells. Think about how a house slowly falls into total ruin. It rarely happens overnight due to a massive earthquake or a sudden violent tornado. Instead, it happens over years through incredibly small, almost invisible failures. A single missing shingle on the roof, a tiny drip under the bathroom sink, a microscopic crack in the concrete foundation. None of these things cause the house to collapse on a random Tuesday afternoon. But over time, the water seeps into the wood, the silent rot spreads, and one day the ceiling caves in completely. Your personal finances operate on the exact same brutal principle. We're heavily trained from an early age to fear the massive expenses. We worry about buying a car we can't actually afford. We stress over taking out a massive mortgage or booking a luxury vacation on a high-interest credit card. We treat those big numbers with deep respect and heavy calculation. Because they're huge, our brains correctly register them as highly dangerous. We pause, we do the math, and we have serious conversations before pulling the trigger. We build massive mental walls to protect ourselves from these obvious financial predators. But those tiny daily purchases slip right past our mental security guards, completely unnoticed. A $4 coffee simply doesn't register as a real threat. A quick tap on a digital wallet to rent a movie doesn't trigger the same heavy stress response as buying a brand new car. Your brain fundamentally miscalculates the danger because it only evaluates the isolated individual event, not the long-term cumulative sequence. You tell yourself that $5 couldn't possibly ruin your life. And in total isolation, you're completely right. One $5 purchase is meaningless. But isolation is a massive lie. This is exactly where the financial fog begins to form. When you make 20 or 30 of these microscopic transactions in a single week, they blur together. The human brain simply can't effectively track a high volume of low-value data points in the background. We lose count quickly. We completely forget that we bought an overpriced lunch on Tuesday by the time Thursday afternoon rolls around. The dense fog rolls in, completely obscuring the actual running total. You end up living in a state of sheer financial blindness, navigating your entire month by pure guesswork rather than actual math. You have to realize that this thick fog isn't a natural weather phenomenon. It's a highly engineered, deeply intentional environment. 30 years ago, buying a cup of coffee required physical cash. You had to go to a physical bank, withdraw paper money, put it in a leather wallet, and physically hand it over to another human being. You actively watched your stack of paper get smaller. There was real friction. There was a tiny moment of pain. Today, that helpful friction has been entirely eradicated. You just wave a glowing piece of glass near a plastic terminal and a machine beeps. That little electronic beep is the exact sound of your money vanishing silently into the fog. It happens so unbelievably fast that your brain barely has time to register that a transaction even occurred. You get the coffee, but you don't feel the sharp loss of the capital. This brilliant separation of the immediate reward from the pain of payment is exactly why these tiny purchases are so deadly. You're getting all of the immediate dopamine without any of the immediate consequence. The painful consequence only arrives weeks later when you check your banking app and feel that heavy pit in your stomach. So please, stop blaming your supposed lack of willpower. Willpower is a heavily finite resource, exactly like a battery that drains rapidly throughout the day. You couldn't possibly rely on willpower to fight off hundreds of tiny temptations when the entire modern economy is specifically designed to bypass your logical brain. You're fighting a brutal war against invisible enemies using the absolute wrong weapons. As long as you rely on simply trying harder, you'll continue to lose the battle month after month. The true hidden reality of the problem is that you don't have a discipline problem at all. You have a systemic visibility problem. You're operating blindly in a landscape where the cost of living feels impossible, because a massive percentage of your hard-earned income is quietly bleeding out through 1,000 tiny paper cuts. To finally fix this, we have to stop trying to heal the cuts one by one with sheer willpower. We have to step back, look at the entire system, and completely rewire the way you interact with small numbers. We have to clear the fog. To truly understand the depth of this problem, we need to zoom out and look at the massive societal machine you are up against. When you sit on your couch feeling guilty about your bank statement, you naturally assume that you are failing at some basic adult skill that everyone else has already mastered. You think everyone else is walking around with perfect mental spreadsheets, easily resisting temptation. But the actual data paints a completely different and deeply terrifying picture. Look at the research from financial institutions like Bankrate. Their studies consistently show that the average American spends several $100s every single month on absolute impulse purchases. We are not talking about rent, utilities, or necessary groceries. We are talking about unplanned, spur-of-the-moment transactions that happen simply because the opportunity was right in front of them. When you multiply that by 12 months, you are looking at thousands of dollars completely vanishing from the average household every single year. This isn't an accident, and it certainly isn't a coincidence. You are currently living in what economists call the frictionless economy. For the past 20 years, the smartest engineers, psychologists, and data scientists on the planet have been working tirelessly on one single goal. Their entire job is to reduce the amount of time and physical effort it takes for you to part with your money. They track your eye movements on screens. They test different shades of green for the checkout button to see which one makes you tap slightly faster. Think about how incredibly aggressive this system has become. You can now buy a physical item being stored in a warehouse 3,000 miles away while you are sitting at a red light in traffic. You don't have to enter your shipping address because your phone already memorized it. You don't have to type in your credit card number because it is permanently saved to your browser. You just double tap the side button on your phone, the screen briefly scans your face, and the money is completely gone. This extreme lack of friction completely short-circuits human biology. Throughout all of human history, acquiring resources required significant physical effort and careful planning. Your brain is wired to expect a delay between wanting something and actually getting it. During that natural delay, your logical brain has time to step in and ask if the purchase is actually a good idea. But one-click ordering completely bypasses that logical filter. By the time your rational brain even realizes what is happening, the transaction is already approved and the dopamine hit has been delivered. The exact same brutal psychology applies to the modern subscription economy. A recent financial study found that the average consumer underestimates their monthly subscription spending by hundreds of dollars. Companies figured out long ago that asking you for $120 upfront is incredibly difficult. That feels like a massive purchase. But if they ask you for $10 a month, your brain categorizes it as a harmless microtransaction. They use your own brain against you, banking on the fact that you will set it up once and completely forget it exists. You sign up for a free trial to watch one specific show on a random Sunday night. You tell yourself you will cancel it on Monday morning. But Monday morning gets busy, the week flies by, and suddenly you have been paying for a service you haven't opened in 7 months. The company relies entirely on the invisible fog of your busy life to keep charging your card month after month. You have to realize who your actual opponent is in this fight. When you try to use sheer willpower to stop overspending, you are essentially bringing a butter knife to a massive modern war. You are fighting against multi-billion-dollar corporations that use artificial intelligence algorithms to know exactly when you are most tired, most stressed, and most likely to seek comfort through spending. They know your habits better than you do, and they design their digital storefronts to trap you in moments of weakness. So you need to take a deep breath and finally let go of the shame you have been carrying around. You are not weak for falling into these traps. You are simply a normal human being operating in an incredibly hostile financial environment that was specifically designed to drain your resources without you noticing. You cannot outsmart algorithms with simple willpower. You cannot beat a perfectly optimized digital casino just by promising yourself that you will try harder next time. If you want to actually win this game and clear the financial fog for good, you have to completely change the rules of engagement. You have to stop relying on your exhausted brain to make perfect decisions in the heat of the moment. Instead, you have to build an automated, mechanical system that does the heavy lifting for you. You have to intentionally put the friction back into your financial life. Here's what most people don't realize. The battle against small, everyday purchases is not actually a mathematical problem. It is a purely biological one. When you try to budget by just looking at a spreadsheet and telling yourself to spend less, you are completely ignoring the heavy chemical reactions happening inside your own head. You are trying to use logic to solve an emotional and neurological physical reaction. Every single time you make a purchase, no matter how small or insignificant it seems, your brain releases a tiny hit of dopamine. It is the exact same powerful chemical that floods your system when you eat a piece of chocolate, win a small prize, or see a new notification pop up on your phone. Your brain craves this chemical deeply, and it will constantly look for the path of least resistance to get it. That $4 iced coffee you buy every afternoon is almost never about the actual coffee. It is entirely about the ritual and the chemical reward. It provides a temporary, socially acceptable escape from a highly stressful email inbox. It is a physical excuse to get up from your desk, walk outside, and feel the sun on your face. It is a 3-minute vacation from your heavy adult responsibilities, and you are simply paying a tiny admission fee to experience it. You are effectively self-medicating your daily stress with microtransactions. When you are tired, overwhelmed, or just incredibly bored, your brain starts screaming for a comfort response. In the modern frictionless world we just talked about, comfort is always readily available for less than $10. You aren't buying a digital movie rental because you deeply value cinema. You are paying $9 to turn off your anxious thoughts for 2 solid hours. This brings us to a massive psychological trap known as decision fatigue. Imagine your self-control and willpower as the battery indicator on your smartphone. You wake up in the morning after a good night of sleep, and that battery is sitting at 100%. You feel incredibly optimistic. You make a healthy breakfast, you pack a lunch, and you confidently tell yourself you will not spend any unnecessary money today. But as the day progresses, every single choice you make slowly drains that battery. You have to decide how to respond to an angry client. You have to navigate heavy traffic. You have to resolve a conflict between your kids. You have to make hundreds of micro decisions that slowly chip away at your mental energy reserves. By the time 3 o'clock in the afternoon rolls around, your willpower battery is blinking red and completely depleted. When your mental battery is dead, your prefrontal cortex practically shuts down. That is the highly evolved, logical part of your brain that cares about your long-term savings rate and your future retirement account. With the logical guard asleep at the wheel, the primitive part of your brain completely takes over. And the primitive brain only cares about immediate survival, immediate comfort, and immediate dopamine. That primitive brain simply does not understand the concept of compound interest or monthly budget categories. It only understands immediate gratification. So when you are walking past a bakery on your way home, or when an advertisement pops up for a cheap digital game, your exhausted brain screams yes, before you can even process what is happening. You swipe the card because you literally do not have the cognitive energy left to say no. To make matters even worse, we all suffer from a massive cognitive bias called mental accounting. We subconsciously treat different amounts of money with completely different levels of respect and caution, even though a dollar is always mathematically a dollar. We create imaginary buckets in our head, and we put strict rules on the big buckets while completely ignoring the small ones. Think about it. If you find a crumpled $20 bill sitting on the sidewalk, you will probably spend it that same day on a completely useless gadget or a fast food meal. Your brain categorizes it as free money, so the normal rules of saving do not apply. But if you earn that exact same $20 by working hard at your job, you treat it as serious money meant to pay the electric bill. We do the exact same dangerous thing with our everyday spending. We mentally file tiny transactions into a category called meaningless expenses. We compare an $8 lunch to our $2,000 monthly rent payment, and our brain falsely concludes that the $8 is mathematically irrelevant. Because it is such a tiny fraction of our major bills, we trick ourselves into believing it literally does not count. But the banking system does not have a special forgiving category for meaningless expenses. The bank just subtracts the money, dollar for dollar, day after day. You are constantly telling yourself little white lies about the true value of small bills. You tell yourself it is just a coffee, just a snack, just a quick subscription. And those continuous little lies are exactly what create the thick, suffocating financial fog you are drowning in right now. So how do we actually fix this? The very first step to defeating an invisible enemy is forcing it out into the open. You cannot fight a thick fog by simply swinging your arms around blindly and hoping to hit something. You have to change the environment completely. You have to turn on a massive set of stadium floodlights. In the financial world, this means you must entirely remove human memory and human estimation from your money management process. Your memory is inherently flawed and highly biased to protect your ego. When most people finally hit their absolute breaking point with overspending, they make a very predictable and fatal mistake. They sit down at their kitchen table on a Sunday night, open up a blank spreadsheet on their laptop, and declare that they are going to manually type in every single purchase from now on. They meticulously collect their paper receipts and aggressively categorize their spending for about 3 or 4 days. They feel incredibly productive and highly responsible during this short honeymoon phase. But we already know exactly what happens to this manual spreadsheet. It completely falls apart by Thursday afternoon. Why? Because manual tracking requires a massive amount of friction and mental energy. You are taking a problem that was caused by a depleted willpower battery, and you are trying to solve it using a tool that requires even more willpower. It is a mathematical impossibility. You will get busy at work, you will forget to log a few days of spending, and then the sheer shame of being behind will make you abandon the spreadsheet entirely. We need to build a system that works perfectly even when you are exhausted, sick, or completely unmotivated. That brings us to the first rule of this automated framework. I call it the fog clearing audit. We are going to completely outsource the tracking process to a machine that never sleeps, never forgets, and never lies to you to spare your feelings. We are going to use automated aggregation software. There are dozens of incredibly secure applications available right now on your phone that will do this heavy lifting for you. You securely link your checking account, your credit cards, and your digital wallets to this one central dashboard. And then you just step back and let the software run in the background. Every time you swipe your card for a $4 coffee, the machine instantly catches it, categorizes it, and adds it to a running total. It requires absolutely zero effort from your exhausted brain. Now I have to warn you about what is going to happen when you first turn this system on. When the software pulls in your past 90 days of transaction history and generates a clean, colorful chart of your actual spending, you are going to feel a sharp sense of panic in your chest. This is the exact moment the fog completely evaporates and you are finally forced to look at the massive pile of tiny numbers hiding underneath. It is a deeply uncomfortable and humbling experience. You will look at the screen and see a category labeled dining out or digital subscriptions. The numbers staring back at you will be fundamentally shocking. You will realize that those harmless $5 trips to the convenience store somehow added up to $400 last month. You will see 3 different streaming services you haven't watched in half a year slowly bleeding your checking account dry. The isolated, forgotten events have finally been stitched together into one massive, undeniable narrative. In that exact moment, your strongest human instinct will be to close the app, delete it from your phone entirely, and run back into the comforting fog. You must fight that urge. You must sit there and look at the brutal reality of your frictionless spending. You have to reframe this uncomfortable feeling immediately. This data is not a harsh punishment. It is a highly accurate medical X-ray. A doctor does not get angry at an X-ray for showing a broken bone. They simply use the information to figure out exactly where to apply the cast. For the first 2 weeks of running this automated audit, I do not want you to change a single thing about your spending habits. Do not try to restrict yourself at all. Do not go on a sudden financial diet or make massive lifestyle cuts. Just live your normal life and let the machine passively record every single financial move you make. I want you to simply open the app once a day, maybe while you are brushing your teeth in the morning, and just look at the numbers. A fascinating psychological shift happens when you establish this passive daily habit. When you know with absolute certainty that an impartial machine is instantly recording every single transaction, the fog begins to lift on its own. The next time you are standing in line for a highly overpriced pastry you don't even want, your brain will automatically flash forward to the image of that daily chart. The simple, effortless act of daily visibility naturally begins to cure the disease of frictionless spending, laying the perfect foundation for the next crucial step. Now that you have the fog clearing audit running silently in the background, you are finally operating with perfect visibility. You can see exactly where the leaks are happening. But visibility alone does not actually patch the holes in the boat. Knowing that you are spending $300 a month on random digital conveniences is incredibly helpful, but it does not physically stop your thumb from swiping the screen the next time you are bored. To actually stop the bleeding without relying on sheer willpower, we have to move to the second rule of our automated system. We have to build what I call the friction funnel. The core philosophy of the friction funnel is incredibly simple. We are going to intentionally sabotage the frictionless economy that the massive tech companies spent billions of dollars building. Their entire goal is to make spending money as physically effortless as breathing. Our goal is to make spending money highly annoying, deeply inconvenient, and physically demanding. We are not telling you to completely stop buying things you enjoy. We are simply putting massive speed bumps on the digital highway to force your exhausted brain to slow down and actually process what is happening. The very first step of the friction funnel happens inside your digital devices. I want you to go into the settings of your web browser on your phone, your tablet, and your laptop. You need to find the autofill section and completely delete every single saved credit card and debit card number. Scrub them entirely from your digital ecosystem. Also, go into your favorite online shopping apps and remove your saved default payment methods. Do not let these companies hold onto your financial data for the sake of your own supposed convenience. By removing your saved cards, you are establishing a hard physical barrier between your sudden emotional desire and the actual purchase. Think about how this changes your behavior in real life. Let's say it is a Thursday night. You are lying on the couch in your sweatpants, and an advertisement pops up for a digital gadget or a flash clothing sale. Your primitive brain gets excited. You click the link, and you add the item to your digital cart. In the old frictionless system, you would just double tap your screen, the phone would scan your face, and the money would be gone instantly. But under the new rules of the friction funnel, you get to the checkout screen, and it demands a 16-digit card number, an expiration date, and a security code. Your card is securely tucked inside your wallet, which is sitting on the kitchen counter in the other room. To buy this item, you physically have to stand up, walk across the cold floor, retrieve the plastic card, walk back, and manually type in all of those numbers. This is where the magic of the friction funnel truly shines. You are literally using your own inherent human laziness as a financial superpower. 9 times out of 10, when you are faced with the physical inconvenience of getting up off that comfortable couch, your brain will suddenly decide that you do not actually want the item that badly. The dopamine hit is no longer worth the physical effort. You will close the browser tab, put the phone down, and go to sleep. You just saved yourself $40 by simply being too tired to type. The next layer of the friction funnel involves your digital wallet apps like Apple Pay or Google Pay. These are massive traps for tiny daily purchases because they completely remove the physical pain of parting with money. I recommend unlinking your primary debit card from these rapid tap services entirely. If you want to buy a coffee, force yourself to physically open your physical wallet, pull out the actual plastic card, and insert the chip into the machine. This simple physical action gives your logical brain an extra 3 seconds to wake up and evaluate the situation. You physically feel the card in your hand. You have to interact with a machine. It slows the entire transaction down just enough to break the hypnotic spell of impulse buying. Over time, that slight annoyance resets your brain's expectation of instant gratification. You begin to mentally associate spending money with a deliberate physical action rather than a mindless wave of a phone. The final layer of the friction funnel is the mandatory 24-hour cooling off period. For any purchase that is not an absolute basic necessity like groceries or gasoline, you must establish a hard time delay. When you are shopping online and find something you desperately want, you are completely allowed to put it in your digital shopping cart. But you are absolutely forbidden from clicking the checkout button until exactly 24 hours have passed. This rule brilliantly hacks your brain chemistry. When you click the Add to Cart button, your brain actually releases a massive rush of dopamine, giving you the exact same chemical high as actually buying the item. But because you force a delay, the chemical spike slowly fades overnight. When you wake up the next morning and look at the cart with a clear head, the emotional urgency is completely gone. You will look at the item and wonder why you ever wanted it in the first place. You successfully got the thrill of shopping without actually draining your bank account. Now that you have established perfect visibility with the audit and built physical barriers with the friction funnel, you might be feeling slightly claustrophobic. This is a completely normal reaction. When most people hear about putting friction into their financial lives, they immediately associate it with extreme deprivation. They think the ultimate goal is to never buy a coffee again, to never rent a digital movie, and to live like an absolute monk for the rest of their lives. But if we rely on pure deprivation, we are going right back to the fatal flaw of relying on willpower. If you completely strip away every single small joy from your daily routine, your willpower battery will eventually snap entirely. This is the financial equivalent of going on a brutal crash diet where you only eat plain celery for a week. You might survive for 5 or 6 days, but by Saturday night, you will find yourself eating an entire chocolate cake in the dark. In the financial world, extreme deprivation always leads to a massive, catastrophic binge purchase that completely destroys months of hard work. To prevent this inevitable snap, we have to create a safe, contained space for your primitive brain to actually get the dopamine it desperately craves. We need to implement the third and final rule of this automated framework. I call it the allowance account. This is a physical and psychological firewall that permanently separates your heavy survival money from your lightweight sanity money. It completely removes the guilt from the equation while simultaneously putting a hard, concrete ceiling on the damage. The very first step is to open a brand new checking account at a completely different banking institution than your primary checking account. I cannot stress this enough. Do not just open a secondary account at the same bank where you can easily transfer funds back and forth with a single tap on your phone. You want geographical and digital distance. You want it to be slightly annoying to move money into this new account manually. This new account is going to come with its own dedicated debit card. This piece of plastic is going to become your guilt-free card. Everything you purchase from this point forward that falls into the category of a microtransaction, a daily convenience, or a mindless comfort buy must be purchased using this specific card. Your primary debit card is now exclusively reserved for rent, groceries, electricity, and essential medical bills. It is no longer allowed to buy coffee. The next step is to sit down and figure out a realistic, mathematically safe amount of money that you can comfortably afford to completely waste every single month. Maybe that number is $50, or maybe it is $200, depending entirely on your income. You need to be brutally honest with yourself during this calculation. Do not pick an artificially low number just to feel financially righteous, because you will only end up breaking the system when the money runs out too fast. Once you have that safe number, you are going to log into your primary bank account and set up an automatic recurring transfer. If your allowance is $200 a month, set the machine to automatically send $50 to your new allowance account every single Friday morning. Do not ever do this manually. You want the machine to execute this transfer while you are still sleeping. By the time you wake up, your weekly allowance is fully loaded and ready to go. Think about how incredibly liberating this feels in everyday practice. It is a stressful Wednesday afternoon, and your brain is screaming for a fancy iced latte. Instead of wrestling with a deep sense of guilt and trying to do complicated mental accounting about whether you can afford it, you simply reach into your wallet and pull out the guilt-free card. You swipe it, you get the coffee, and the dopamine hit is perfectly pure. You do not feel an ounce of shame because that specific money was already completely budgeted to be burned. But here is the hard, unbreakable, mechanical law of the allowance account. When the balance on that specific card hits zero, the micro-spending completely stops until the next automated transfer clears. You cannot overdraft the account. You cannot put the purchase on a high-interest credit card instead. And you absolutely cannot transfer an extra $20 over from your primary rent account just to get through the weekend. Zero mathematically means zero. This simple rule creates a highly effective environment of artificial scarcity within a perfectly safe boundary. When you know you only have $15 left on your guilt-free card for the rest of the week, your brain suddenly snaps to attention. You start evaluating your tiny purchases with a level of intense clarity that you never had before. You actually start to respect the small numbers again because the resource is visibly finite and impossible to fake. You might find yourself skipping that Wednesday afternoon coffee simply because you know you really want to rent a movie on Friday night, and you only have enough allowance left for one or the other. You are no longer restricting yourself based on a vague, oppressive sense of guilt. You are making an active, highly empowered choice based on a perfectly defined resource that you completely control. The fog is completely gone, and you are finally steering the ship. Now that we have built the mechanical walls to protect your money, we have to look at the actual numbers. I know that looking at the heavy math of personal finance is usually the exact thing that makes people want to close the video and run away. We are so conditioned to believe that math is a weapon used to make us feel guilty about our past mistakes. But I need you to stay with me here, because we are going to look at these numbers differently. This math is not a punishment. This math is the exact blueprint of your future freedom, and it is going to show you exactly why building this automated system is worth every single second of effort. Let us imagine that you have successfully implemented the fog clearing audit, the friction funnel, and the allowance account. During your first month of tracking, you discover a deeply uncomfortable truth. You realize that you were completely bleeding out about $250 every single month on absolute nonsense. This was money spent on fast food when you already had groceries at home, forgotten streaming apps you never watched, and random impulse buys from targeted social media ads. You were spending this money purely to soothe your exhausted brain. In the moment, $250 over the course of an entire month does not feel like a massive financial disaster. If you break it down by the day, it is barely over $8. $8 a day feels like a completely acceptable cost of living in the modern world. It is a rounding error in your checking account. It is the price of a fancy sandwich. Your brain naturally dismisses $8 as fundamentally irrelevant to your long-term survival. But remember, your primitive brain is completely incapable of understanding long-term sequences. Let us fast forward exactly 10 years. If you never changed your habits, if you just kept walking blindly through the financial fog, you would continue to bleed out that same $250 every single month. Over 10 years, that completely invisible, painless $8 a day turns into $30,000. I want you to really stop and picture $30,000 in physical cash sitting on your kitchen table. That is a massive safety net. That is a heavy down payment on a piece of real estate. That is the ability to walk away from a toxic job without panicking. And yet, it just evaporated entirely into the fog, completely unaccounted for. But the brutal reality of the frictionless economy is actually much worse than just losing $30,000. In the financial world, we have to talk about opportunity cost. When you spend that $8 a day on a temporary dopamine hit, you are not just losing the $8. You are permanently destroying what that $8 could have become if you had put it to work. You are robbing your future self of the heavy compounding growth that builds actual generational wealth. Let us run that exact same $250 through a different machine. Instead of letting it bleed out into the digital cash registers of massive corporations, imagine you automatically redirect it into a basic, boring stock market index fund that tracks the S&P 500. Historically, the stock market returns an average of about 8% per year over the long term. When you invest that money, it starts to earn interest. And then, the interest you earned starts earning its own interest. Your money starts working a night shift for you, completely independent of your physical labor. If you take that $250 a month, the money you completely saved by simply putting friction between yourself and your impulses, and you invest it every single month for 10 years at an 8% return, you do not just have $30,000. The difference between losing $30,000 to the fog and gaining $45,000 in an investment account is an absolute massive swing in your total net worth. You essentially created $15,000 out of thin air simply by changing the mechanical rules of how you swipe your card. Now, let us stretch the timeline out to 20 years, which is a very normal working career for most people. If you keep the system running, and you just keep investing that perfectly recovered $250 a month, the math becomes absolutely staggering. After 20 years, you would have nearly $150,000 sitting in your investment account. All of that money came directly from the invisible microtransactions you used to make without even thinking. This is the exact secret that the multi-billion-dollar corporations desperately do not want you to understand. They understand the math of compounding perfectly. Why do you think they push so incredibly hard to get you onto a $10 monthly subscription instead of selling you a product one single time? They know that if they can capture a tiny, recurring fraction of your monthly income, they can use that money to compound their own massive wealth over decades. They are getting incredibly rich off the exact same math that is keeping you feeling completely broke. When you finally realize this, the entire game changes. You are no longer restricting your spending because you feel guilty, or because you are trying to be a perfectly disciplined robot. You are restricting your spending because you deeply understand that every single dollar is a highly trained worker. By implementing the fog clearing audit, the friction funnel, and the allowance account, you are simply rescuing your workers from the fog and sending them to build your own personal financial empire. Let us go all the way back to that exact same couch from the very beginning of this conversation. Picture yourself sitting there a few months from now on a random Tuesday evening. You pick up your phone, and the screen glows in the dim room. But this time, when you tap the banking app and watch the little loading circles spin, there is absolutely no dropping sensation in your stomach. There is no anxiety. There is no desperate mental math trying to figure out where your hard-earned money actually went. When the balance loads at the top of the screen, you just smile. The chaotic, endless list of tiny, forgotten numbers is completely gone. In its place, you see a clean, organized list of deliberate choices. You see your automated investments processing smoothly in the background. You see your weekly allowance transfer hitting exactly on schedule. The suffocating financial fog has completely evaporated, and you are finally standing on solid, clear ground. You are finally in absolute control of the machine. This is the true definition of financial peace. We spend so much of our lives believing that wealth is only about massive, highly visible achievements. We think wealth means buying a massive house with a white picket fence, driving a luxury European car, or taking a private jet to a tropical island. We are constantly sold this grand, cinematic version of success that feels completely unattainable for the average hardworking person. But true wealth, the kind that actually matters to your everyday sanity, looks incredibly boring and remarkably peaceful. Wealth is simply the total absence of that tight, panicky feeling in your chest when your car breaks down. It is the ability to walk into a grocery store and buy the healthy food you actually want, without calculating the exact total in your head while standing in the checkout line. It is the quiet confidence of knowing that your future is mathematically secure because you built a mechanical system that actively protects you from your own worst emotional impulses. You have to remember that you are living in a society that actively profits from your total exhaustion. The frictionless economy is not going away anytime soon. The massive technology companies will only continue to invent faster, easier, and more invisible ways for you to part with your money. They will build smarter algorithms, they will design more addictive digital storefronts, and they will constantly try to pull you right back into the heavy fog. Your attention and your comfort are the most heavily traded commodities on the entire planet. But now you understand exactly how the trap actually works. You know that relying on pure willpower is a mathematically guaranteed path to failure. You know that every time you choose convenience over friction, you are silently trading a tiny piece of your future freedom for a temporary, fleeting hit of chemical comfort. You are no longer fighting blindly in the dark against an enemy you cannot see. By building the fog-clearing audit, the friction funnel, and the guilt-free allowance account, you have staged a quiet, powerful rebellion. You have drawn a hard, concrete boundary between your baseline survival and your daily entertainment. You have accepted the biological fact that your willpower battery is fundamentally flawed, and you have chosen to rely on a cold, unfeeling mechanical system instead. You have taken the power away from the massive corporations and handed it directly back to your own future self. This is exactly how you turn a life of quiet desperation into a life of profound optionality. When you consistently respect the incredibly small numbers, the massive numbers automatically take care of themselves. When you stop bleeding out hundreds of dollars a month on invisible conveniences, you suddenly have the capital to invest, to start a small business, or to simply sleep peacefully through the night without grinding your teeth over an impending credit card bill. Money is never just about buying physical things to impress people you do not even like. Money is a tool that you use to buy your own time back from a world that constantly demands it. Every single dollar you rescue from the frictionless economy is a tiny, highly trained soldier fighting for your ultimate independence. Do not let those soldiers die a meaningless death in a digital checkout line, just because you were too tired to walk across the room and get your physical wallet. The path out of the fog is right in front of you right now. It does not require a massive salary increase or winning the lottery. It does not require extreme intelligence or complex financial degrees. It only requires the willingness to sit in that temporary discomfort, look at your actual data, and deliberately put the physical friction back into your digital life. You have the exact blueprint in your hands. Now, you just have to build the machine. So I want to ask you a serious question to think about tonight. When you finally pull the transaction data and look at your own personal financial fog, what is the single biggest invisible leak you expect to find hiding in those tiny numbers? Is it daily coffee, digital subscriptions, or mindless online shopping? Let me know your answer down in the comments, because voicing it out loud is the very first step to taking your power back.